Hello, everybody, and welcome into a post-game show, series recap, whatever you want to call this. My gosh, it's finally over for the Maple Leafs are finally moving on to the second round. As you can see, I've got Peter Baracchini, who covers the Leafs, Jim Bay, who covers the Tampa Bay Lightning. Elation on one side, of course, disappointment on the other. But we'll start with you, Peter. There's some takeaways from this game in particular. We'll move on to the series a little later, but what are your thoughts right now after John Tavares finally gets the Leafs to the second round?
I mean, it had to be one of the the core players. It had to be a Matthews, Marner, Nylander, John Tavares getting that game-winning goal. And boy, does that ever feel like a weight off the shoulders of everyone on that team right now, because now we can stop talking about, is this team built enough to get over these, playoff humps? Can they overcome these mental blocks during elimination games? And they did it. And that was the main thing. And I think the biggest thing for this game was when things got ugly, and this could kind of tie into like the whole entire series. When things got ugly, they didn't waver, they didn't back down. They still managed to put on some pressure. And despite getting outplayed in the first, 10 minutes, they kind of bounced back, found some momentum. Same thing happened in the second period, especially after Matthews's first goal. They still managed to apply some pressure. Third period, different scenario, because I think they just wanted to try and, eke out the end of the game, try and go into overtime, and then regroup from there. And it looked like, Tampa Bay may have had it with a couple of early chances, especially that Isom breakaway, where it could have been the deciding factor. But then again, it had to be a lucky bounce or one of those instances where it's going to be one of those goals that you have to say, of course, that's how it's going to go in. And lo and behold, Tavares's goal was off. I believe it was Radish's skate that went in, and then off the skate and in. So those are the kind of goals and bounces that the Maple Leafs haven't had in the past. And now this is the third time in the series where they kind of got outplayed. They didn't look all that great. They managed to show some moments and show some fight and grit, but ultimately they managed to end up winning ugly, and that can propel them to greater things on a deep playoff run.
For sure. It really felt like the same thing when the Canucks they kept losing to the Chicago Blackhawks, and they finally did the same thing after some drama and stuff, and they finally win it in overtime. Pretty similar. It was a broken play, and Burrows makes a great play. But yeah, I mean, this is going to go down in Maple Leafs lore for even if they don't get out of the second round, this is going to be a big moment. And hopefully they do go further. But we'll see. We'll talk about that later. Jim, over to you. I mean, the Lightning, full marks. I mean, they were in it. They fought back. This was a very tight game. They could have won it. Samsonov was insane in the first period. Second period, he had a great game. The goaltending performance that the Maple Leafs needed to win. What did you think about the Lightning's performance in this game? Fighting to try to move it back to Toronto for Game 7.
Well, the performance was good. I mean, the thing about, this game and the entire series is they look, it should burn in the off season, because the 3 games that they lost in overtime, they could, clearly make a case that they were the better team. For most of this game, they played, better than the Maple Leafs. They had their chances in the first period. They could have got up early. Big credit to Samsonov. He did an amazing job to keep them in. He was solid. He didn't have any of the hiccups that he had in some other games with positioning and other things that, led to some other goals. So, it's going to be a tough one. They're going to look back and just, shake their heads and go, we had this. We could be playing Game 7. They conceivably have been done by now. Mm-hmm. They really could, have closed it out at 4-1, 4-2. But again, they didn't. And, kudos to the Maple Leafs for hanging in, not giving up, not folding. They could easily come in and hung their heads and, pouted all the way through this game and say, well, maybe we'll get it back in Game 7, but probably knowing what happened last year, it was probably a good thing that they didn't. And then they closed it out, because I think it would have been tougher. But it's going to be a long off season for Tampa, and it probably should. But we'll see what happens from here.
Yeah, that's going to be some questions of what happens. I mean, they still got a really solid team. We're going to have a full offseason preview show on what could happen for teams once the offseason starts. Peter, we mentioned Samsonov. What'd you think? Did you think he was, because he was the goal? I mean, they've changed goalies every season, it seems like, and see if one goalie could actually push him to the second round. Samsonov has that on his resume now. What'd you think of his performance in this game and then the series as a whole?
Yeah, I don't think the Maple Leafs would even think about winning if, Samsonov didn't have the performance that he had. Like, he was absolutely lights out. And this is the longest time where they needed to find a goaltender that can, try and stop the bleeding, have the performance that they have, and make it a point where, they could find some stability in net. And Samsonov did that. And again, like I said, right from the bat, Tampa Bay was already applying the pressure. And you saw the tentativeness from the Maple Leafs, how they weren't that great. And Samsonov was backstopping them the whole entire way, making, save after save after save, and just being a critical factor to try and keep the Maple Leafs in there. And, that's the kind of goaltending that has eluded the Maple Leafs for some time right now. And, even looking at their post-game stats right now, expected goals against was 2.70. So that's one, or like close to 3, where maybe Tampa Bay should have gotten more than just one. And even the high danger saves, 10 shots against, 9 saves, 1 goal against was that Stamkos goal. And that was the big thing. They needed to find a way to have a goaltender to be a factor and make the stops in the trapezoid or home plate area, because that was a major factor in the past. And Samsonov had one of the better numbers in that regard. So for him to shut the door down when they needed him to was a great motivational boost for this team, because if it weren't for him, you're looking at probably Joseph Wall, another rookie, because you already had one in Matthew Nice on the ice, coming in cold, trying to make the impact that he had. And that's going to be a very difficult scenario for him. Could have probably had maybe Akira Schmid, numbers, but that's very unlikely. But I do think that they would not be in the situation without Samsonov and his stellar play to make the key saves and give the Maple Leafs a fighting chance when he did.
Yeah, I mean, goaltending, it was an interesting to watch this series with the goaltending between Samsonov and Vasilevsky, and Jim moving over to Vasilevsky. I mean, yeah, he was good in this game. There was no problem with him. But overall, throughout the series, he had his ups and downs. Going into next season, we talked about this at the end of the playoffs last season too. Do they need to do anything else to kind of keep him? It seemed like fatigue may be a factor for him. Do they need to do anything else to kind of make sure that this doesn't happen again, where he doesn't have the best performance in the first round?
Well, I think for the fact that they're done and that he's going to have now a few 2-3 months before he, they get back into, training camps and stuff like that, is probably maybe the only upside for him and the rest of the team. I think there were a few other issues that, maybe he wasn't sharp, but they also didn't really play well in front of him. I think, the other, story about this is having, their top defenseman, Cernak miss, because of the headshot. That's a huge thing. It would have made it a difference in the series. I don't know. We can always speculate, but when you lose your best defensive defenseman and you lose 3 overtime games, I think that's something that's going to, be in the back of, people's minds, and it, as well as it should be. But I think, the opportunity to get some rest, do whatever they need to do, and then, come back, maybe, I don't know where they're going to stand with Elliott next year. Maybe, they're not going to be able to do much with the cap, but could they get somebody, to come in and say, yeah, maybe we can give them a few more games off than, what we did. And they actually did this year and did a few things. Whether it was enough will remain to be seen. But, in the end, I don't think that was like, the biggest factor. But next year, if they want to make a run, it will be, because at some point, it's going to take a toll. If it already hasn't.
For sure. And you're looking at a goalie that, like we said, he's played so much hockey, and it was a factor in this series. So I mean, it still went 6 games, and he still had a great performance in this game and the last game. So can still step up when needed. So Vasilevsky is still an elite goaltender for sure.
Yeah, in the past 3 years, I think he's played 2 or 3 more games than any other goaltender in the NHL. So, it is a tough thing. And the fact I think that he's done as well as he did, especially the last 2 games. I mean, he really, after all of that, I think the little controversy with the former assistant coaches Lalonde's statements on Sportsnet and all of that, the X-ray vision comment and stuff. I think little bit of a fire on him and probably gave him a little bit of adrenaline to help him through the fatigue, maybe.
Yeah.
But in the end, he wasn't the issue. I mean, in some of the other games he was, but in this case, and especially in the past 2, he did what he needed to keep him in the series.
Yeah, I mean, it was tight throughout. The past 2 games were tight games. So,
yeah.
And there were some blowouts early on. Peter, I want to ask you about the 11-7 change for this game. They did some big changes. They brought in 2 defensemen. I mean, a lot of people were clamoring to get Liljegren in and Justin Hall out, which happened. And then bringing in Gustafsson as well, and taking out Lafferty and Aston Reese. So there's a lot of changes to the lineup moving into this game. What'd you think about it? And was it effective in the end? Obviously, they won, but
yeah, it was a gamble for Keith because in the end, you lost game 5 with the players that you already had, and Hall and the 2/3 of that fourth line not really generating anything and being really ineffective in Lafferty and Aston Reese. And despite Aston Reese being a factor in, the earlier games, he didn't quite have it in game 5. And obviously with Justin Hall being on for 14 goals against in the series, that is very, very telling. And he needed to make a change. He needed to not sit back and still go with the status quo lineup that got him to this point. There were times where John Cooper had to make changes to his lineup, and it proved to be effective. Now Keith did the same thing, and it paid off very, very well. Obviously, Liljegren, a little bit rusty, but still showed some moments because he hasn't played that much, especially in these playoffs. But I thought Erik Gustafsson looked really good. Obviously, the 11-7, he was going with that quite a bit. And although it wasn't quite effective in the regular season, it had hits or misses. Mm-hmm. Boy, it paid off in the playoffs because it ended up giving them the advantage. And, Gustafsson really hasn't played much. And the Maple Leafs traded Rasmus Sandin for him and got a first-round pick in return for him as well. But, he really didn't quite get the ice time because they're all locked up on that left side. So now that he had his chance to come in, you can move Liljegren to the right side. You have another option on the fence. And, he was, I'm not going to say effective on the power play because the power play didn't look that great at all. But at 5-on-5, he was good. He was a little bit more sharper defensively than Justin Hall. He made some big time blocks and key plays to make some timely breakouts to, calm the nerves of the team, get out of dangerous situations. And I thought he looked great. And even Michael Bunting coming in, he needed to keep things in check because he missed 4 games because of the suspension and was benched. And I thought he played really good. I thought he had some good chances, played with a lot of energy and pace, didn't get involved with any of the extracurricular stuff. So yeah, it kind of worked out getting those players, and you have the energy and the skill and the speed that can keep up as opposed to that of what you had with Lafferty, Aston Reese, and Hall.
Yeah, I forgot Bunting came back into the lineup as well. So quite a few changes that ended up working out in the end, even though it was a tight game right until the end. And I'm sure Leafs fans were angry when Stamkos tied it and like, oh no, here we go again. And then going overtime, my gosh.
That was crept right in again. I could guarantee that. At least Twitter went dead quiet.
Yeah, well, like I say, this is very, very similar to what happened with the Canucks because Jonathan Taves tied the game in the 3rd period late. And then we're like, as fans, we're like, oh my gosh, it's happening again. Chicago's going to win. But obviously didn't happen. We'll see if the Maple Leafs can go to the final, just like the Canucks did. And after that's what happens. So. All right. Well, before we end the show, I want to let's give out a few awards for this series. We'll start with you, Jim. Even though the Lightning lost, there was a lot of positive things. A lot of players played really well. Who would you give the, we'll say, unsung hero award to that, didn't get a lot of the headlines, but did their job?
My unsung hero for the series and probably for the year would have been Brandon Hagel. He, a lot of the stuff that he did is not going to, show up on the score sheet, but he was a force on the offensive end. He did a lot of things to, his forechecking. He's just such a pest in both ends that, I think he helped create a lot of opportunities for other players. So he's my unsung hero for the Lightning in this series.
All right, Peter, the Maple Leafs are moving on. Who is your unsung hero for this series? I mean, there's quite a few to choose from that stepped up at different times, even though they did lose that one game or two games to make it a little bit interesting. What do you think of unsung hero?
It's definitely Matthew Knies. I mean, a rookie coming in, not only that, like losing the NCAA championship to the team of the arena that you're playing in as well during this series is really tough. But everyone was questioning whether he was going to, be a real factor, making the transition from, NCAA to the NHL. It's really difficult for any player from any rank, junior up, what have you. He didn't look out of place. I can tell you that right now. He was extremely effective. Although he didn't find the score sheet, he did assist, I believe, on that game winner on Tavares, because I'm seeing a third assist in his point tally column right now. So that is big. Nice. So 3 assists in the games that he's played. So 3 assists in 5 games. Didn't play in game 1 because, he was scratched for bunting. Came in afterwards and he was just lights out. Very good with his management, very good with the speed, the improved speed that he had, the hands, the ability to crash the net, get in on the forecheck, winning puck battles. That's what made Knies successful at the NCAA level. And it translated very seamlessly to the NHL level. Obviously, again, a few hiccups here and there, a couple turnovers, bad plays. Didn't lead to any dangerous or led to some dangerous opportunities, but no bad results. He's got to feel good about this, because even when he was playing well and Bunting was coming back, Keefe wavered that he was not coming out of the lineup. So I think from here on out, you're going to see Matthew Knies regularly, and he was the unsung hero for me during this series because of the impact that he was able to have and being put into a situation that was very, unheard of for him. So I was really impressed with his play.
Yeah, Knies really impressed me throughout the series. And, we mentioned on Maple Leafs Lounge about him too. And, he's been great. And too bad he hasn't scored yet. I mean, he has time. Now he's got another series to do. He could do it in. So we'll have to watch for him for sure. All right, let's go to a bit of a downer for this award. Jim, who disappointed you throughout this series? I mean, who'd you think that should have stepped up that kind of never did? If anyone.
Yeah, I think for me, it would be kind of hard because it was really a team kind of thing. You're thinking about some of the players that maybe Nick Paul. He had the one big goal last game, but he was fairly silent through most of this series. He did a lot, and I think that would be the closest one to a disappointment. You could also, again, make the case for Vasilevsky too, for, outside of the 2 games, they're partly in this situation. It's a little debatable whether he's the total cause of it, but that would be my first 2 candidates that I would think of. Probably Nick Paul. I think, when they got him last year, from Ottawa, the big thing was he was built for the playoffs. And, last year he did. This year, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, their depth played quite well. I think the most effective line was when Isamont came in, and that line was like in the Maple Leafs zone probably every time they were on the ice. And then Isamont almost won it again. He could have been my
unsung hero too if he played the whole series, because he's another pesky player. He had that really interesting goal in the game, that kind of off angle one, and he kind of created a lot of chaos sometimes. If he had been in there the whole series, he could have been my unsung hero. But it definitely, he provided a spark for them when he came in. I think it was a good move by Cooper. Jeannot of course, we'll never know what kind of, health he was in. My guess is, other than they needed the spark, he wasn't at 100%. So, I think that was a good move there on his part to get him in.
Mm. All right, Peter, on the other side, moving into the next series, who needs to step up going in? I mean, this goes in hand in hand, being disappointment in this series. Who needs to be better going into the next one?
That's a really tough one, because I think the easy answer for me would be Justin Hall. I mean, this is the guy that played regular minutes, got scratched, and then Maple Leafs win without him. And I don't think he's going to come back in unless the Maple Leafs lose game 1, game 2 of the next series, what have you. But he really needs to find that consistency on defense. I mean, the fact that he panics under pressure, bad clearing attempts, poor positioning, the routes that he takes is very questionable. I think he really needs to step it up and get it together, because there were stretches down the regular season that, he looked like he was battling for a spot and he was playing really well. And this series just dictated that he really wasn't, especially if you look at the goals against column, because he was on for majority of them. So I think that's the easy answer for if I had to pick another one, and it's not a knock against him for production wise, because he was productive with 7 points. It's just William Nylander. Because he tended to fade in and out at times. Obviously in game 4, where he had that first penalty on Stamkos, and he was a factor on the 2 goals against at the beginning. It looked like, he was starting to have that aspect of him, not playing up to the standard that Keefe would want him to. And then he comes back with 3 assists in that game and shined like William Nylander could. I think if he's able to find that consistency here on out, he's going to be a big factor for them. I mean, he already is with the amount of production that he had. I just think the consistency and decision-making needs to be a little bit more, because they need more from their star players than just Austin Matthews. I think Mitch Marner needs to step it up a bit, because he kind of went quiet the last 2 games. But, overall, I that's just me nitpicking a little bit, because you expect everybody to be on top, especially right now heading into the second round.
For sure. All right, let's get to our MVPs. I mean, even though the Tampa Bay Lightning lost, there's still some great performances that came out. We'll start with you, Peter. Who's your MVP for the Maple Leafs for this series?
Despite Mitch Marner getting 11 points, I'm giving it to Austin Matthews, because you talk about one of your best player to step up in the big moments. He has stepped up big time in the last 3 games. I mean, obviously game 5, he brought the Maple Leafs to within 1, but he was a factor throughout that whole game, trying to, spark the comeback and everything like that, just like he did in game 4. And for him to show that winning aspect, that, tenacity, that, killer instinct that the Maple Leafs had lacked for some time, he was making an impact nonstop, and that he was a main factor on that first goal. So that shift that he was on, even a couple ones before, he was the main factor of why they got sustained offensive zone time. So for me, and for him to score key goals at key moments, I'm giving him the MVP over Mitch Marner as a result of that.
All right, Jim, you can give the team the series MVP to the Maple Leafs, a Maple Leafs player too, but who do you got as a MVP?
Well, my MVP, I've been hearing a lot, following Toronto and looking at your meal. I think the unsung hero MVP is going to be Ryan O'Reilly, because from what I understand, he did a ton to kind of give the Maple Leafs, being somebody who's been there, done that, won. He might be the guy who got them over the hump. We don't know what goes on in the locker room. We've heard things, things have come out. To me, I'm going like, I think that's been the difference maker. The other guys on the Maple Leafs pretty much did what they needed to do. I think you can make a case for Samsonov too. For all of that, because especially after the game when, oh boy, you're 1-8 or 1-7, after your playoff games, he could have completely folded, but he didn't. And, kudos to the team and to the coaching and whoever, kept him pumped up and kept him pretty solid, most of the way.
Yeah, great choices there. There's a lot of MVPs I could pick from. I'm I'm giving it to Samsonov just because of this game. I mean, he could have, if he had a bad first period, all those negative thoughts are going into the Maple Leafs heads. They're like, oh no, here we go again. He didn't. It kept it scoreless for the first period and lots of high danger chances in that first period. Samsonov didn't let anything in. So I'm giving it to him, and he was great. I'd say he was really good throughout the series too. So I'm going to give it to him, even though, Matthews definitely could have it. O'Reilly, definite candidate as well. So, lots of great performances from both teams. The Lightning, like I said, full credit for hanging in there and, going down 3-1 and, going to the Stanley Cup final. This could have been their fourth time, winning 2 cups. They could have just folded it in and say, okay, well, this is done. We're not doing this anymore. But they kept it going till the end. But Maple Leafs just ended up winning it, and they're moving on. So there you go. All right, final question. And because we don't know this yet, they're going to play it face either the Boston Bruins or the Florida Panthers. It was a game 7. It's coming up. Peter, who do you want for the Maple Leafs standpoint? Who would you want in the second round?
Oh, that's a tough. I've talked with many friends, other writers and stuff like that. Like, this is going to be very tough because it looked like the Boston Bruins were going to steamroll the Florida Panthers, and the fact that they managed to claw their way back, and Matthew Tkachuk is having the performance that he's having right now to try and force this game 7. It's going to be really tough because, on one hand, the Bruins are still the President Cup trophy winners for a reason because they're dominant in the regular season. Looked like that in the first 3-4 games, but the last 2 haven't been that great. Are they starting to feel the effects of the curse? I know they've dealt with some injuries. I know that game 6 was very entertaining, but there was a lot of miscues and poor positioning and mistakes from the Bruins defense and everyone else up and down the roster. So there's that, but then also you have kind of like the underdog mentality of the Florida Panthers, where they're probably going to put up that fight against anybody. And, they managed to claw their way throughout the regular season. It looked like they weren't going to make it, but then they found that extra gear down the stretch, and it's going to be really, really tough. But I don't want to pick a team because it's the playoffs. Anything can happen. The Maple Leafs were built for going up against a team like the Bruins. So automatically I would want to say the Bruins to try and get some retribution in the past. But I'm scared of Boston still because they're that good. And same with Florida. You got to tip your hat to them because especially Bobrovsky coming in and playing up to that contract where he hasn't lived up to that in the last few seasons. So definitely tough. I want to say to be determined. I don't know. But it's definitely going to be an entertaining second round. That's for sure.
Sure. Jim, who would you want for the Maple Leafs? Boston or Florida?
That's a tough answer. I think at this point, and they can safely say, even though it's the cliche answer, I don't think it matters. I think you look at, either team, there's probably plus or minuses of each team. But I think the thing they can take away, from the series is Boston's kind of looking kind of mortal now, where they've pretty dominant for most of the regular season. But now they just kind of say okay, we're a really good team. We've got a couple injuries. And now I think, they've kind of come back to the pack a little bit. And whether or not they get through, Florida tomorrow night, they're still going to have to deal with their issues. Like you said, the miscues, the kind of the little nagging injuries. So really, in all honesty, I think, for Toronto, they could, obviously they could easily beat, either team. It's just a matter of, what matching style, that each team will present, whether they can deal with it or not. But, I think they're in good position. They have a lot of confidence, and whoever they play, it's going to be another interesting series.
Yeah. And Boston, they looked a little bit human. And Allmark, who's probably going to win the Vezina Trophy, letting 6 goals this last game. So he's looking human too. So it's going to be interesting to see what team comes out, because they're both, Florida won the President's Trophy last year too. So it's like, you're going up some pretty good teams. So Toronto's going to have their, it's going to be a good series either way. It's going to be stars both ways. It's going to be fun.
Well, I think we talked about before too, the Eastern Conference is a gauntlet.
Oh,
Yeah.
Whoever you're going to come up with, you could make a case for any of the 8 teams that were in there that, that's just whoever comes through is just going to be, that'll just be like, sorry for the cliche, but it's a war. I mean,
Yeah.
boom, 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 boom. Every team is just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, you look at the Hurricanes.
More so than the West. Sorry, Western
Yeah.
Conference. That's a little, that's different. Eastern Conference is tougher. Sorry.
Yeah.
Especially in that Atlantic division too. That's going to be interesting down the line, especially with some teams coming up and exiting their rebuild phase. So they're going to have a tough out, and it's going to be even more competitive down the line.
Yeah, it's going to be fun for the future for sure. But the bottom line is we go, Maple Leafs are in the second round for the first time in 19 years. So, they'll be partying. I'm sure there's partying already in the streets. And yes, it's not a Stanley Cup win, but probably looks like one in the streets right now. But we're into the second. They're into the second round, and that's some unfamiliar territory for Leafs fans. Probably some fans don't even remember when the last time they were in the second round. So
I was still in elementary school when they won their last playoff series. So what does that tell you? It has been a long time coming.
Yeah. Well, you look at the players that were on that team when they did go through. So we were looking at them, and it's like, man, this looks like blast from the past. So yeah, it's going to be fun to see the Maple Leafs in the second round for the first time. We'll see what they do and if they go past the second round and beyond. But for sure, it's fun to be just into the next round and win a series. So thanks, Peter. Thanks, Jim, for coming on post-game, post-series as we react to the Maple Leafs finally winning a series. They win in 6 games. I called that. I did say that.
Same here. There you go.
They couldn't go to 7. That's what I said. They needed to win in 6. So there you go.
How do you think that that viral meme of the corgi feels right now, where it was picking all the games and it picked Maple Leafs in 7? I think that corgi is feeling pretty down right now.
Yeah. But so thanks guys for coming on and talking post game. We'll see you. Won't see you, Jim, unfortunately. But Peter, we'll see you in the series preview for the Maple Leafs, either against the Florida Panthers or the Boston Bruins. But that'll be coming up. Jim, we'll talk to you next in the offseason preview. But thanks everyone for joining us, and make sure you're checking out all the articles that I'm sure are going to be coming out, flowing next days from the Maple Leafs, and they're all going to be positive. So stay tuned for the hockeywriters.com YouTube channel. We'll have the previews coming up, and we'll see you next time on another episode of a reaction show, previews, whatever. We'll see you next time.